And he's
Right,
gonna
Dr. Damian.
yes, he's going to conclude today and on the topic of disaster management. And as of next week, we're going to begin on global peace and training of the peace ambassadors, which is going to go on for 4 weeks. Dr. Damian, it's yours.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
I'm going to ask everyone to mute out while the training is in session, so this way we don't cause any types of interruptions. Thank you so very much. I'll mute myself out also.
Just one question to you, Dr. Damian.
Sure.
Are you able, in terms of your PowerPoint presentation, is that PowerPoint you're using or Adobe?
PowerPoint?
Yeah, I was thinking the other night that we were watching that if you tried there's one that brings the slide up fully on the screen rather than going through the things like this. You'll see the slides that you, yes.
One that called view, it's view and it's presentation.
Sorry?
There's one that's called on your view.
Presenter view, presenter view.
Yeah, presenter view, correct.
Yeah. So if you go into presenter view, this is what, yeah, that's great. And you should still be able to see the slides that are coming up and go through them. Yeah, okay, good.
All right, gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much. We're all mute out and the training starts. Thank you so much.
All right. So last time we stopped at evacuation, and the only thing that I want to describe about evacuation is the strategy. Now, as part of the disaster management unit in San Fernando, the city of San Fernando, we came up with an exercise to evacuate the city, a tabletop exercise. How are we going to evacuate this city of 150,000 people in one day? And we realized when we started talking to the bus service, the taxi driver service, the minibus service, the water taxi, as well as everybody else, this was a very tall order because San Fernando is built like Grenada capital, going up a hill. It's not nice and flat like Bridgetown, Barbados, or Antigua. It's going up a hill, and half of the city is on the other side of the hill. So communication is an issue. So we had to plan and plan and plan and focus on what would be priority. If we had an industrial accident at the refinery when it was in operation at that time, what we would need to do is prioritize evacuation of the schools and the elderly homes and the hospital. Everybody else, we realized a lot of people didn't have foreknowledge. Nobody ever tried to tell them, nobody attempted to disseminate knowledge and information and plans about how far the blast zone is from a major refinery and what could be the implications for you. So with that, we realized that the 4 water taxi vessels could only take 1,600 people. 1,600 out of 150,000 doesn't make sense. Where are you going to take them to? The bus service at any one time only had 30 buses. How many schools in San Fernando? 29. Primary and secondary. And we didn't even count the kindergartens. 1 bus per school. I'm pretty sure there's more than 1 busload of kids per school. So if you're trying to get the kids out of the school, you have a major logistical nightmare. And then there are a couple of schools the entrances do not facilitate bus traffic. So by the time I left government employment and went out on my own, I realized that they were left with a very tall order in planning an evacuation of San Fernando. Fortunately, an evacuation of your neighborhood should be easier. However, you still need to sit and plan it. Now, in an evacuation, there is also a shelter stage. What is the shelter stage? This is focusing on the provision of refuge to evacuees with nominated evacuation facilities or a safer location. So normally you would choose a well-built school, excuse me, or a sports stadium. Now, when you say a sports stadium, you have capacity for seating of, let's say, 25,000 people. That does not mean you can accommodate 25,000 people long term. All your facilities will be overwhelmed. But in a major disaster, how do you count how many people you're going to let in? You're going to need a small army to manage just one shelter. And if it's a public space, when people coming there, if you're the designated government shelter manager, you better have armed backup. And this is a major issue that we had to get the armed forces and police involved in the planning stages. And if you know anything about police, you have police working on shifts. And they often have the leadership of the stations being rotated. So it's a really tall order, first of all, to make your plans, have them tested on paper, then communicate your plans to all different agencies, including the armed forces, and getting everybody to concur and understand the intent. And you'll have to be prepared to modify to suit the capabilities of some of these agencies. So getting back to the shelter in place. Through the ODPM, we had to do a lot of work in involving police senior officers such that they would understand the disaster management framework. All right? Because you will need that support when people are flocking to a safer destination. Now, the other unfortunate thing is that if you have a major disaster occurring, there's no stocks in that stadium waiting for the unfortunate and displaced who managed to make it there. And we've all watched a disaster movie or two. There's no stocks there. And what happens is when people get hungry, which is normally the day after, then things get ugly. And when I say ugly, I mean really ugly. This is when people, before this, if you have a supply truck coming, before the supply truck arrives, they basically attempt to loot it. It's very unfortunate, but desperate people do desperate things. And you have to be prepared mentally, especially when you decide to pursue further studies to withstand when you see this ugly behavior occurring. All right. So hazards threaten to impact a community, and if the evacuation is not required, individuals are responsible for deciding whether to shelter in place or find alternative accommodation away from an exposed area. And you'll base that decision on your current situation. If there are warnings on the radio telling you which areas are prone to damage or flooding, then of course you would want to take heed. Your decision to shelter in place or to evacuate is also based on your specific needs and priorities. If you have convalescent people or invalids in your home that you give care to, it's not that easy to pick them up, throw them over your shoulder, and take them to someplace safer. All right, so your families and neighbors' needs, you may decide that you're going to stay to be supportive to a neighbor who is incapable of exiting on their own 2 feet. And your location also. How far away are you? How much traffic is there? What's blocking you? What could block you? What if there's a major bridge that you have to cross? Could that bridge be compromised in extreme weather events? So all these things you need to plan before. You need to widen your thinking, all right? Get trained and start thinking outside the box. Now, after the event, no government could continue to shelter people and provide for them for very long in one location. And it was not publicized, but post-Hurricane Katrina, a lot of people were seriously traumatized who had to use the shelter facilities of stadiums or large churches, right? There were many, many stories of abuse to children, abuse to women, stealing of property, because you're not in rooms, you're in designated quadrants, or maybe in a tent. And your entire family, you can't sit together all the time. All right, so a lot of things we don't know about a shelter because we've never had to face it, or we've never been exposed to it. And then a stadium, having built a couple stadiums myself, I can tell you a stadium has a certain capacity. And a stadium with a seating capacity of 25,000 people can barely handle 8,000 live-in residents. Right? Any more than that, and you never could tell from the natural disaster how many people will be trying to avail the shelter. All right? Anything more than that, systems within a stadium infrastructure will fail. So as fast as possible, you want people to return to their homes, right? The return process, maybe emergency services has to take them home and help them with restoring their homes. Some people could return to some areas and not to all. All right, or you may allow people to stay, to leave the shelter and go daylight hours to their homes and do work on their homes to bring it back to normal, and then come back to sleep at night at the shelter where it might be a little safer. It all depends on the situation that you've just undergone. Logistics, you know, we often hear the word logistics. Logistics is a skill, and it's only in the last 10 to 15 years that it has been recognized as a skill that's training is needed in. Previously to that, you know, some people were just very good at coordinating, and some people through experience, they know what's needed, and by the experiences they had, their body of knowledge expanded. So when an event happens again, they know what to do, what's going to be needed. They know the plus, the minus, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the crazy. Okay, and you know, over time they started to put some structure to the discipline of logistics and logistics management. But logistics management has a lot of administrative boundaries, especially when you're dealing with public funds. And this is where we have problems that separate the resources from the impacted communities, and you have problems with getting it on time to those that need it. So the logistics function in the coordinating center at each level of disaster management arrangement is a real central role, right, in returning people to their areas. So somebody has to assess. Normally, this would be the emergency response services. And based on information gathered from boots on the ground, they would make a decision whether to allow people back or not. Because it wouldn't make sense to allow people back to their homes when there's still floodwaters and there's no utilities. All right, this diagram just tries to help you understand that managing requests for assistance, you know, it's good if at your local area you could map out how you want these requests to go through, and you can broadcast it so that people know beforehand. If you have a request for disaster relief supplies, this is how you go about accessing it. Emergency supply is the acquisition of management of emergency supplies and services after a disaster and during disaster operations. All right, now in the NIMS ICS, there's a logistics section chief, and under the logistics section chief are a number of people that you can pull in volunteers to work with them. For example, you could put a team of people, let's say from a youth group or from the Boy Scouts, to handle water distribution and give them the administrative framework to record how much water is given and to whom. All right. Somebody else or some other group can be in charge of giving out bed clothes, bed linen, food stuff or food vouchers, and they all report every 2 hours to the logistics section chief. And that way the logistics section chief can let the emergency commander know how much is left, so that when the emergency commander has to make a report to, let's say, the Minister of National Security or the Minister of Social Services, that person can let them know, I have 1 day left of water, I need a truckload of water, and the like. Now, resupply operations is critical, especially if an area or a community has been isolated. All right. Now, across the Caribbean, we have a lot of that possible. We have hills and valleys, hills that are subject to landslides and cut off the roads, and then valleys that are subject to flooding, which again would cut off the roads, bridges that may be washed out, which leaves a small village or a not so small village cut off with no utilities oftentimes. And not every village would have a jetty that would allow boats to land. So fortunately, in the face of affluence, we have some countries having helicopters. When Dominica suffered the damages from that hurricane a few years ago, Trinidad sent 2 of our helicopters from the military. And after successful operations over 3 weeks, one of the guys crashed one of the helicopters because he simply had difficulty with the steepness of the terrain and getting to some of these remote areas to drop supplies. Unfortunately, so those things do happen in resupply operations, and it's one of those things you have to plan for. So financial management, the inherent nature of disaster events means somebody has to spend some money or money has to be spent. And that's normally taxpayer dollars. Also, people in a disaster-stricken area often cannot go to work. So there is income issues. All right, if you're a daily paid person and for 3 weeks you're cut off and you cannot go to work, then that's 3 weeks you didn't have any money. How are you going to eat? Unfortunately, in disasters, your bills don't stop running either. So this is where people would need financial support. And I've seen in the COVID situation, almost every government made some form of financial assistance available, all right, to the elements of society that are most in need. So in the MBA class that I'm teaching in Guyana, one of the ladies in the class is actually the administrator from the Office of the President of Guyana in charge of the distribution of relief checks. All right, so she was giving us some of the stories of how creative some people get when they attempt to get more than one check. Yes, and that happens among us. So there are also financial arrangements that, if you set them up beforehand, can be activated to provide support financially to communities impacted by a disaster. But this, of course, would be a specialist function, and it has to be properly accounted for. And that's just one of the areas of training that we can offer to the appropriate individuals who are in charge of public funds for post-disaster arrangements. Operational reporting is important for notes to be made, for people to know the structure to report. So at the local level, at the district level, and the state level, all right, it doesn't matter what level you're operating, the NIMS ICS system still follows the same pattern. So it's easy to talk at the village level to the NIMS ICS trained team, and that village level can talk to the district level team in the same language, who then talks to the national level incident command team. All right. In the NIMS ICS, there's a lot of logs. Every log is numbered, and it's easy to take the notes down. When you do the NIMS ICS training, everybody gets a booklet and a training manual. So in case you forget what the functions and responsibilities of the different offices are, for example, logistics section chief, planning section chief, tactical coordinator, it's a quick pocket manual you can refer to, and it's paired to the different forms that are required to be filled out in an event or in an exercise event. And the forms are auditable. So for the purposes of tracking finances, how the forms have been designed makes it easy for, let's say, the Auditor General to order an audit on how money was spent for post-hurricane or post-earthquake operations, simply by securing the tasking logs and making a study of them. Now, after you've had the event and people have sheltered, people have gotten supplies, they have gone to their houses, you cleaned up the shelter, and you're ready to leave the post and get back to your regularly scheduled program, A debrief, have a different debrief conducted immediately after response operations concludes. All right, so you share learning points while your response experiences are fresh. Hot debriefs help also to transfer information to the team that's relieving you. Because one thing we didn't mention yet is that you can only work so many hours. There's no special Lucozade or power pellet in an event, a disaster event, that will enable you, the volunteer or the appointed response person, to work more than 24 hours. Most of us cannot work more than 24 hours. So we need teams of people to alternate, and a hot debrief helps to pass relevant information on to the person who's taking command from you. There are also post-event debriefs. This is conducted a couple of days or a couple of weeks after the stand down, after the response operation concludes, and you've had some time to rest, reflect on, and consider how effective the operation was. All right, so all agencies will have to have a debrief. At the debrief, someone is described and they take notes, and these notes are passed up the chain, ending up at the Ministry of National Security or Ministry of Social Services, whichever has the responsibility for national level response. And this information is used in planning to sort out deficiencies, to see what new we have encountered and what we're going to do about it for the next event. All right, we mentioned this to some extent. Event management systems, similar to warning systems. Recovery. Now, post-disaster, recovery won't happen in a day. It can be complex. It can be a lengthy process. You have different communities that will recover at different rates. Some communities, in the rare instance, they would be declared a disaster zone, and basically people won't be allowed to go back there if the infrastructure was so badly damaged, right? If there's a lot of houses lost, or as in the case in Honduras, the storm was so bad an entire river changed course, washed out a couple of villages totally. All right. Also in Venezuela, in one part of Caracas, there was like 6,000 people died in a mudslide. And the resultant slope after the mudslide was simply inappropriate to rebuild anything on. So the recovery element of the comprehensive approach to disaster management, that's our prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery, or PPRR, can be the most complicated and the most extensive. All right. This is where you're going to have a lot of noise, a lot of people clamoring. We need support. The media has a feeding frenzy with these things. But a recovery strategy can be planned for affected communities or planned for potentially affected communities. This will need collaboration, coordination, resources to be committed from not only the government, but family groups, community groups, business, and essentially every level of the government. Now, the community-led approach supports rapid restoration of services that you will need, and it's an important opportunity to build resilience. For example, if at the rebuilding stage we realize a 2-foot by 2-foot box drain is inadequate for the surface runoff, then we will need the intervention of the government to come and make, let's say, a 4-foot by 4-foot drain to take the major water away and prevent flooding in the future. So in recovery planning and operations, we have to understand that past experience, current strengths, and future capacity are all important. All right. Somebody needs to appreciate that there are risks and stresses that were faced by the community. So sensitivity and empathy is important. All right. And then there are vulnerable elements of the society. There are some people who are less fortunate. There are some people who will be classed as poor, below the poverty line, and then there are those that are destitute, especially after losing whatever they may have collected. Over time, they lost it to a disaster. And then there are also the vulnerable in the community, the very young, the sick, and the very old. Right? So we need to understand that the impact on our community can extend beyond geographical boundaries that the disaster occurred. So complexity in disaster recovery operations. So if you were thinking that there was a lot to know before you get into volunteering, during and right after a disaster, it's even more long drawn out and complex when you have to rebuild with the aim of resilience in mind. Right? So we, you know, they say charity begins at home. So we want to enable people who we live amongst, first of all, to restore their life. All right. And if you're a well-organized local action group, it's easy to identify those who will need more help than others, and it's easier to lobby for district and national level help. Communication. Now, I'm sure all of us have been in a church or two, and we realize that communication is a two-way street, and there's volumes we could say about communication. However, what we want to focus on is when we communicating from our local group up the chain, and when we communicating from the local group to the wider community audience. There's two different types of communication. We have to be able to speak to our audience every time. All right. So there are a lot of mechanisms that you will have to establish to coordinate and ensure that you consistently communicate between service providers, organizations, and individuals in the community. So if you're making representation for, let's say, 7 residents on a street to be have their power restored, all right, it's easier if one person from the local community takes the responsibility to communicate with the district supervisor from, let's say, the power company or the water company, and feed them the correct information, rather than to have the utility supervisor being bombarded by 7 different people and a significant other. You know, because it happens when, you know, I've seen it happen, witnessed it, where the guy called and he was very polite. The man of the house called, he was very polite, and he said, well, sir, you know, it's been 10 days and y'all ain't come to fix back our power and stuff yet. You know, we're in a very difficult situation, and he's being nice. And the supervisor, who's, you know, he's going to have his restrictions and his limitations, and he apologized and he said, well, look, I'm doing the best I can. You know, we're 2 streets away, just need to bear a little bit, and we'll get to you in due time. Well, the homeowner's wife decided, nah, you ain't talk to her how you're supposed to talk to him. So give me that phone and call back the supervisor and give him a real earful as if that's his son she talking to. So do you think she was able to win friends and influence people? Probably not. And if she was a Christian, then she would have lost the Christian witness by that action to the utility supervisor. Desperate times make people do desperate things. Effective recovery. This is where we need integrated multidisciplinary approach. Needs analysis. It's easy to get confused when we looking at what people need versus what they want. There will be people who will say, well, if the power company come in, the entire, but that is not the function and that is not the intent of the power company post disaster. What they want to do is to restore some power to you. The equipment upgrade and all of that, they will replace wires, they will replace poles, but they're not coming to give you a full upgrade at that time. But if you make a good friendship, then transport. The responsibility for the functional lead will be related to their core business activity. All right. So you wouldn't ask the water company to come and help you with moving the lamp pole that broke down. It doesn't make sense. That's not their core competency. All right. So this diagram here just shows the Australian setup in terms of the policy and planning and the functional recovery groups. All right. So in your country, it may be similar, it may be different, but it has to be mapped out at some point in time. All right. So the resource materials that you have in here will give you a template to start mapping out your own stuff. Right, we talked about local disaster management groups, LDMGs, which is where you're going to start on your journey as a disaster management professional or as an informed volunteer. The district management groups, some of us may very well, after being trained and gaining the experience, some of us may end up with a full-time career as a district disaster management leader or officer. So similarly, like pre-event planning, we have to do recovery planning. This would normally be a kind of hard conversation to have because the recovery planning, it requires some skill sets, it requires some expertise where you could reasonably foresee the damages. Now we have data. We have loads and loads of data. So you could reasonably foresee and forecast if I'm struck by a category 3 hurricane, what is the potential damage my community might suffer? And then if we suffer that damage, how do we recover How long do we project would it take? What's the budget? How much might it cost? Just to come back to what we had before the disaster. Right? That's going to take a lot of effort to come up with a figure, to come up with a plan. Communication planning also, it's also recommended to develop a communication plan for the recovery group. That is how to coordinate effective communication with the community members as well as other stakeholders across the recovery function. So essentially, what this means, you get the numbers from people in the different utilities and community leaders in neighboring communities. You make a contact list to start with. And you don't wait till post-event to contact these people on the list. You contact them before, at your soonest convenience, and tell them you would like to meet with them to have a conversation, whether it's face-to-face or via Zoom. You want to have a conversation with them about certain things. And you can share with them your disaster management plan and ask them if they would like to input or if they would like to work with you in your recovery planning. And that simple approach would help you a lot in establishing communication and relationships that you will need to call on after, during and after a disaster. Right? So just like I said, identify the communication pathways. You may want to include the media because the media could help highlight your plight as long as they don't go sensationalist. Right? And we mentioned the alert levels before. Lean forward, stand up, stand down, and you could call them anything. Blue condition, or DEFCON 1, or stage 1. You know, there's no copyright on how you're going to name your trigger levels. All right. If you're from a predominantly military bearing, it would be different. But as a group, you must identify the trigger levels for activation and make your plans. Review your preparedness arrangements and existing plans, including your primary scoping for future recovery planning and impact assessments. All right. So it's impact assessment, where could be impacted and how badly. That's essentially what an impact assessment is. It's to write it down in a simple table, where and who could be impacted, how, and how badly. All right, so a little bit about triggers here. All right. Agencies and organizations can undertake to support the response by collecting data, communicating, and doing scenario planning to prepare the community for a disaster. So in the early stages of stand-up level activation for a response operation, the various agencies will move to lean forward level of recovery activation. Right about this time is where everybody will be updating their impact assessment documentation. The information from the response agencies will be reviewed and analyzed. As information comes, you don't just take it wholesale, you analyze it and make sure that, first of all, it's true, it's correct, and it's making sense. Now, if situation dictates, so if you have intelligence that tells you that you need to deploy resources to the community, you may call this the stand-up level of activation. All right. So this is where you start your short-term, medium, and long-term recovery efforts. There will be some people who would, because they didn't suffer so badly, they would recover quite quickly, and then they in the very short term they've restored life to normal. But then there are others who will be part of the medium-term planning or the long-term recovery effort. Transitioning from response to recovery. This is normally influenced by the nature of the disaster. So you have to be pretty much flexible, right? So geographical dispersion is one of those factors affecting switching from response to recovery. Okay. In terms of recovery, we normally have a little flow diagram here. So a disaster occurs, you look at the right side. In the red, the disaster occurs, boom, you're hit by something. And then you respond to help people, to save lives, etc. And then there's post-impact relief and early recovery. That's the immediate short term. That's your phase 1. Your phase 2 is reconstruction, which is more medium to long term. Phase 3 is somewhat of a transition from the construction to the occupancy, right? And ironing out any teething problems. And the ultimate goal at the end of the game is to get back to business as usual. In our case here, we have a new normal with the COVID situation, all right? And then we have preparation for the next event and the opportunity to build resilience. So post-impact relief and early recovery, some of the key actions. All right, in the relief stage, it's immediate short-term recovery. There must be impact and damage assessments undertaken. Now, you can estimate how much damage was done. But in terms of the quantifying, you might say, boy, it damaged bad, bad, bad. Or plenty people have problems. These subjective terms don't really help. If you're a qualified civil engineer or a civil engineering technician, you'd be able to give a better estimation. All right, you would be able to say, we have approximately 40 people on 2 streets who have suffered major loss, and you could start quantifying. So the impact and damage assessment, it's better always if you could use some engineering terms, right? But if that is not your forte, try to find somebody who knows the field that you can get help from. All right. If required, you approach the state level. Recovery groups established at the local and district level, and transition from immediate post-disaster response to short-term recovery operations. And you develop the planning, consultation, and implementation of a recovery plan. So just like how we had a disaster response plan and a disaster management plan, we need to also do a response and recovery plan. Right, phase 2, recovery and reconstruction, more the medium term. There's a lot of integration in terms of the methodical recovery and reconstruction activities. A house is not built in a day, and you know this phase continues progressive achievement of key milestones. And if you have a plan at this stage, it helps to prevent contractors fleecing. Because, I mean, not everybody is conscientious that when you've had a disaster, you're in need. Some people are opportunistic and they will take this opportunity to prey on the vulnerable and the weak-minded. Those of us in the know, we have to be prepared to speak out against this kind of thing. Okay? Now, the phase 2 would conclude when you have progressive achievement of key milestones. And these would have been written out in your recovery plan, which should have been sufficiently advanced so that you could see some progress based on the impact assessment that you would have done and the scope for the works. Now, phase 3 is the transition, the handover of the reconstruction responsibilities to the agencies, including government, or to the community-based group, or an industry-led sector, right? That was mostly my concern when I was at Texaco, right? The industry-led sector. Report to the Ministry of Energy and let them know you were fully operational again. Right, so the transition phase would normally end with all recovery and reconstruction managed as business as usual. So when you get to where you're seamlessly reintegrated, or you continue life as normal, this is how you know your transition phase has been completed. And this is normally also coinciding with your stand down from your formal recovery structures. So at around this part is when we say, all right, we've done our jobs. You can make a final report, pass it over to the minister, and then you continue with your other activities, preparing communities for the next event. All right, now we've always focused on reporting, all right, to the minister, or in terms of your local group, you report to the chairman of the group. The chairman has a direct line with the state level or with the national level coordinator. And that's where all documentation generated from the response activity and the disaster management activity would be passed up. Well, maybe a copy passed up and you hold on to your documentation for your planning purposes. It's easy with the NIMS ICS, all the forms have been thought out and you can identify each event the way the nomenclature is designed in the NIMS ICS forms. All right, we talked about financial arrangements, and I'll just remind us that government bodies, all right, they will require transparency, accountability. They expect you to act with integrity. And as a member of the AUGP, we expect nothing less. All right, you do your due diligence. And, in so following these principles, we ensure efficiency, effectiveness, and economy. All right, we had mentioned donations before. So there will be some people who will donate to the immediate response. Sometimes as a group, you may have to go out to these individuals again for a second donation in the recovery. All right. Most people, they say the news only lasts 3 to 5 days. So some people will be willing to pull out a checkbook in the 3 to 5 days immediately following a disaster. They're not ready or willing 2 months after to hear that you still need help or that people still need help, because in their minds, I gave help back then. But if you reach out and share your locally generated plan with your business community. You get them involved, you make them feel important, and you stress to them that y'all are important as part of the community. And if there is an event, then we're going to need your support, not just immediately after the event, but we need your continued support to restore the neighborhood participant lives. All right. So you make known to them early up, you get them involved, you get them engaged, and you share information back and forth with them, and keep them in the loop. Now, whether the financial donation is offered spontaneously or in response to an appeal, it needs to be recorded. All right, so we basically come to the end of what we had intended to share with you on whetting your appetite for disaster management. All right, there are other advanced modules that cover various topics. All right, and if you so wish to avail yourself of the advanced modules, they're about as long as what we've engaged in here, but we do a drill down into different aspects and equip you with some more information, equip you with some more hands-on workshop type activities so that you actually get to understand what is required as an operating officer. Those of us in the United States, FEMA or any other similar national emergency relief organization, in the Caribbean, it will be SIDEMA or SIDERA, or both of them. They have publications that you can avail for free and read. Now, these publications will not give you the qualification because there's no exam to it. Right? Yes, there's exams associated with the advanced modules. Okay, as a learning center, we have to make sure that we have some type of documentation that you understood the information that was imparted to you. And that is evidenced by your writing an exam. Don't worry yourself, you're going to have enough time to prepare before you write the exam. You'll have the notes. You could always refer to your tutor or your instructor to get help. Okay, it's not like CXE where you had to cram, to make sure you get your 5 1s and that kind of thing. This is adult learning. We understand that people have lives and they want to enrich themselves. So in the exams, they focus on the key principles, right? What we call the street map, not the exact house details. All right. Again, I want to put in the final plug for NIMS ICS familiarization for all volunteers, officials, responders, and practitioners. All right. And at this point, I would like to thank everybody who listened to me for these past few days, who I was fortunate enough to share some information with. It has been my honor. And I trust that we'll see each other again when I have the opportunity to share on something else. All right, so I'm going to pass it over back to, okay, before I pass back to Dr. KALLOO, anybody has any questions? Let me check the chat here. All right, no questions so far. Now is the chance where you can ask questions directly. The Dropbox will contain the slide presentations that you can refer back to. All right, Dr. KALLOO has put a lot of good information, world-class information on the Dropbox link. So take full advantage and read them again. Please be discreet with sharing, right? You know, just to respect people's copyrights and the efforts that went into preparing this material. Right, so I'm available. It's raining cats and dogs by me, so you're going to get a lot of noise. Ramona. I see a raised hand.
Ramona, you're free to speak if you want to come on, if you have a question. Damian,
Dr. Damian. Dr. Damian.
Okay, so those who want to avail further training, we are in the process of setting up some online modules. What we can also do is per country, we can make some workshops available, tailored workshops. So we could give you some time to get your people together and we could put together a program. You know, we'll have some conversation before, you know, in terms of a needs assessment, a training assessment to see where you're at, what is the gap, what you're going to need, and outline a roadmap for you based on your involvement. And, you know, we're pretty willing to work with you to make sure that you get the right effective information and not an overload, right? And certainly not leave you needing more if you're supposed to function.
all right, let me just say to everyone that, hello, Dr. Confident. We're not hearing you.
Yes, good evening.
How are you?
I am well. I came up a little bit late as usual, but thank God you have the Dropbox system. I will try to get more information from the Dropbox recordings.
Yes, no problem. So let me say to everyone that Dr. Damian, this is what he does on a professional level by going throughout the Caribbean, many different countries. And he is a legal official trainer for disaster management and preparedness, health and safety hazard, that type of training. So if you want to have him come and set you up and all of that stuff, you know, we have no issues with that. You can make private arrangements for that. You know, he is part of us. He's one of our ambassadors, and he has volunteered to participate in this program to help to educate people, regardless of the fact that this is what he does as his livelihood for a living. He has decided to contribute for free to everybody in this program, in this current training.
Thank you.
So I first personally want to let him know, thank you very much, for Your Excellency, for putting your time, your effort, and contributing such great value to pour into people's lives. We appreciate that greatly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good.
So if anybody on the team, you want to reach out to him, and that's another thing. We have no issues with people communicating with each other. This is a forum where people can use to communicate and to collaborate for global peace, to build each other, to build nations, to build countries, to help to make a difference. And this is the reason why we're volunteering our time, our efforts, our energies, and everything that we have to build one another.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Okay. Pastor John.
Yes, good night.
Happy belated birthday to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I was unable on Monday to be here.
That's all right. We understand, Pastor John. You
But I'm
had to
here
celebrate. You had to have some cake.
Yes, 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 with the family. But I'm here tonight and I'm enjoying the lecture. I would really want to know from Dr. Damian, and by the way, I will communicate with him. I
Yes.
would like to know when will be the exam.
Okay.
Oh,
Now,
for this module, there was no exam.
what
Right?
we've done, Pastor John, what we've done with this training is we're not issuing an exam for it. What we have done is we've taken the time to train and to teach, to help to develop people, not putting stringent rules and regulations or cost. We're basically accommodating people. We want to make a difference by being able to give and letting people know what's available.
Beautiful.
We're willing to contribute as much as we can. As you notice, we don't have a fee for this program, for this training. We're not charging a fee. We're not asking anybody for anything. Our organization, obviously, we are humanitarian. We're a Christian-based foundation. We do have projects that need funding. If somebody wants to donate, we can talk about that. I'll let you know how to do that. But we are not, this is not what we're about. What we're about right now is about building people. We're about one thing, humanity.
Amen.
So we've made this possible.
Thank
And
you.
we will continue to make training possible. We will be teaching in the very near future on topics like public speaking, presentation, time management, organization, management as a whole, how to study your Bible.
Yes.
We want to teach on how to be established in present truth. I want to do the spiritual gift test that would be able to help people to find their gifting, their talents, their abilities, and know who they are, what they're about. And everything that we conduct in this training, there are no fees to it. I'm not charging any fees for it. It's all about building people on this platform.
Thank you.
Amen.
So I trust that people are enjoying, and we're so happy to have you. We're happy to share. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes for people to convey your thoughts. It's an open platform at this point. If anybody have something to say, you have a minute or two so everybody can have a chance. Dr. Confident.
I have to say that I'm really enjoying the fact that I'm part of an organization that is spiritually enlightened and motivated to do the things Jesus would do if he was on this earth, which is serving.
Well,
serving people is not something you find easily. You have to do that through the Spirit of God and to be ambassador for Jesus. And it's a privilege to be among such kind of people. I mean, that's a lot of time and resources that are devoted to each other just for the enlightenment and edification of each other. And for what purpose? To serve our brothers. Amen. As God prescribed, as Jesus prescribed. So it's a spiritual pleasure. That's what it is.
It's a pleasure.
There is such a thing as spiritual.
It's an honor to serve. It's an honor to serve. This is what we're about.
And I thank God for you, Dr. KALLOO. And I thank God for all the speakers who have contributed their times and talent.
Just to let everyone know, Dr. Confident is our international governor representing the country, beautiful country of Haiti. He lives here in the United States, but he's representing Haiti. He's our international governor. He's part of us. He's very talented. He's a medical doctor, and he's doing quite a lot to help people. I'm very, very proud of him.
Amen.
Well, thank you. It's mutual. It's a mutual feeling. together we can make things happen by the grace of God.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. Anybody else? We're gonna use these moments here. Brother Ian, Dr. Ian.
Once again, Your Excellency, Dr. KALLOO, also Dr. Damian, amazing training. There's nothing else I can say but that this training is definitely impacting lives. And as you know, I am extremely happy to be a part of this most distinguished organization. So once again, I know Dr. Damian, you've presented some really heavy stuff, but what you've presented is actually turnkey. It can actually be used right now. We don't have to wait for the next 40, 50 years to use what you have presented. So we want to thank you, and once again, it's good being in the company of all you distinguished peace ambassadors. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I see my two partners there, His Excellency Dr. Steele and His Excellency Dr. Ferdinand Nichols. Thank you.
Dr. Steele, want to take a moment? We're just asking people to take a minute just to say hello.
Yeah, I
Everybody
just
can have an opportunity there.
thank you so very much, Your Excellency. I again want to reiterate with great gratitude the sentiments of His Excellency Dr. Levine, that Dr. Damian really did a great presentation. And I'm an avid reader, so I hope that we will have access to those presentations, long-winded, but really full of information. And I really appreciate this. Dr. KALLOO, thank you so very much for making this possible. Equally, I just want to humbly acknowledge Dr. Anita Davis Defoe, Mariette Ram, and those others that we've brought together to be a part of this. And I trust that they're having a really informative time. Thank you guys so much. Big up, blessings, one.
Thank you.
Yes, peace and love, Dr. Steele. Peace and love. KIWI, peace and love to all of our people here tonight. I thank you. Chief Jaun, Flo, Empress, everybody, even if I forgot you, I'm with you. I just want y'all to know that this coming together is great. Once we complete this, I want to stay together and continue to be in a peace ambassador forum to do the great will of our great spirit all over this globe together with you guys. So I'm honored and thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Chief Orkney.
Greetings to each and every one of you. One here has just gotten out of some very good meetings, and it's been a long day, and I truly missed all of the training here for today, but it is a pleasure to see each and every one of you. Again, the platform that you, Dr. KIWI, Your Excellency, Dr. KIWI KALLOO has presented here has been very, very good, been very informative, has been very helpful and very needed. And I just thank you very, very much from the Okaloosa, Ojukwu Arawak Chata Nation and the American Aborigine Federation. We thank you.
You're most very welcome. We, we're making a lot of headways in this collaboration with the chiefs. We, it's a very exciting time. It's an exciting time. This collaboration with us and this group and the many chiefs and tribal nations, I must say it's beyond exciting for us. We have different tribal nations in different countries. I saw a video this evening earlier with His Excellency McPherson on the Lumi. We go back a little bit, him and I must say that's exciting news. Exciting news there. Some things to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But we're looking forward to the signing of the Global Peace Initiatives with the different nations and tribes. And we're looking forward to great things ahead.
Yo, not to mean to cut you off, the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st, we're focused on looking at that weekend to kind of create ceremony weekend, because it's kind of the beginning of the New Year's for us farmers. So we want to bring New Year's in right. Okay. So yeah, with that being said, that's kind of what we're looking at. And I wanted to kind of get them dates out to you so we can talk further on that with everyone.
All right, you and I will converse on that, Your Excellency, and we will finalize the dates.
Yes.
You know, as far as the certificates, I will work that out with everybody. And as far as the credentials, by the time we get through the next 4 sessions, I will let you know how that will run. The certificates, what we do with the credential is, I have not provided it yet, but I will provide the information where you can send the fees over so that I can put the order in for the badges. Now the ID, the wallet, the certificates, I can get that done within, because apart from physically sending it out, I have to process it by getting the registration numbers. Everything gets passed by our International Board of Governors. And then we have it registered. Then we do the certificates, but it physically needs to be done. And then we get it printed before we issue. Now, we don't print these certificates everywhere. We have a certain location that we have an arrangement with that we trust, where we have our certificates made. Our badges is made by the cop shop of that makes everything for NYPD in New York. And that's where we have our badges made. So when we put the order in for the badges takes about 8 to 10 weeks before the badge will get into your hands. So after we receive the fees, we will go ahead and put the order in for the badges, but you would have your IDs way before that. You can get your certificates and IDs with the wallet together. And I have shown you guys what that looks like. I'll just do it one more time, as I have some that I have to send out. This is one of the badges that we have. We have not made a lot of these. This is the wallet. Okay. I have to get out of that mode there. And then we have these. As you can see, if I get on the camera. Okay, so it carries our number here for the United Nations registration. Our certificates. Anyway, we can have all of that process. So before we get to the end of the last session, I will have everybody's information. I know I have sent it off. There are still a few people pending to send me information. But what I may do, as far as the tribes, Chief Bigup, you and I will need to talk and work out a few things there. But I'm confident we'll get everything done. Everybody, for your time and effort of sitting through the training, will have official certificates showing the time and effort you've put into these trainings. It's really been a pleasure in doing what we do together here. Thank you very much.
Dr. KALLOO.
Yes, Dr. Sims.
Good evening. I want to officially welcome my wife, Latoya, who is unofficially, because I have to separate in geographical location while we are not sharing the same space this evening. Her name is Latoya. I just want to officially welcome her on, who is actually doing the training as well. I will update you with her information as well. And I must say this, the training over the past week, weeks have been really strengthening to us. And it helped us to go back through a few things that we have covered before. And some of the information that we are getting here as well, they are new information, and we really appreciate the information. I just want you to know that we really appreciate it. And we are very eager to create our own structure for our local area as well, and help the bodies that responsible for these areas as well.
Yes, I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge Dr. Ferdinand, who has been facilitating on the Zoom. Dr. Ferdinand is our international governor representing the island of Barbados. Dr. Ferdinand.
Good evening to everyone. I was just trying to find the digital versions of the ID card, Dr. KALLOO, and a copy of the certificates that we could probably share. I could share them on the screen so that you would be able to see that. I'm just going to I'm just going to put one of the IDs up. And just let me try to share the screen with all of this technology. So, okay, this is the ID here. That's the UN ID that is issued, and the certificates. Let me see if I can just open up one of these, just with just for you to get a look at. Stop sharing that one and let you take a look at this one. And I hope you all can all see that. That's the type of certificate there.
Yes.
So those would be the ID and the certificate that Dr. KALLOO would be referencing. Certainly has been a learning experience to sit at the feet of Damian and be exposed to things that generally from a church perspective we wouldn't normally engage, even though when there are challenges and disasters and so on in our different countries, very often the government calls on assistance with the churches because we are already involved in a lot of community outreaches and that type of thing. But to certainly see the structures that are required and the synergies and the networks and the organization that is required has been tremendous. And Dr. Damian, I just want to, on the behalf of I believe everyone that would be in this training, to thank you for offering free of cost. And I don't think that this is something that any of us take lightly. You have offered tremendous service, and you know it's just amazing. The experience, and I listen carefully to you, that even in spite of the fact that we have the knowledge, I keep hearing this word experience coming up all the time. And I really appreciated being able to sit and grasp so much. There is just so much. And I'm going to have to take some time to go back and sit down and certainly go through step by step. It has been a tremendous session with you. We want to thank you for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you, Dr. Ferdinand. Now, let me just say that having received the disaster management and chaplaincy training, it puts you ripe in the position to be a first responder. Now, in every area that you've been trained over the past couple of weeks, when you receive your credentials, one of the things I want to tell you is you can go, what we do here locally in the United States, you have the ability to go to your local police precinct and fire department and register and let them know your credentials, who you are, you live in the neighborhood, and let them know that you're available to assist with any type of disaster as a chaplain, as a first responder. You are there available to help them. And then they would recognize that if as the need arises, they can call on you to interact with serving the community. And this is how we make a difference. We make a difference by showing up and letting them know that we're available and we want to contribute to society, to the community. So I know in New York, it's something that we do greatly. And I'm saying to you, whether you're in New York or even in the islands, you can do the same thing and it will make a big difference. You can make a difference, one person at a time.
Your Excellency, Dr. KALLOO.
KALLOO.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, Dr. Steele, go ahead, please.
Oh, I give way to age, sir.
Dr.
You
KALLOO,
got
just in order to clarify a notation at the back of the ID card which speaks about the Geneva Convention. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you want to update the team here about relative to that particular notation?
Yes. Dr. Ferdinand, can you pull up the back of the ID one more time?
One step ahead of you. Already one step ahead of you, my friend.
Okay. Now, this is how our IDs are formatted on the back. You can see that we are affiliated to most major organizations of the world as far as building peace. Now, on the bottom, you would see in red that foreign authorities are requested to afford bearers such assistance as based on the Geneva, let me just get rid of this thing here. Assistance and protection as may be necessary with immunity in accordance with Geneva Convention of the United Nations, and the numbers are there. Now, the reason that is there, our ID is not just an NGO ID that we just decided to make an ID. We are intergovernmental, and just so you understand, you can do your own research and find out about the IGOs. We are one tier lower than a full government. And this ID was actually authorized and approved by the United Nations. And that allowed us to, Dr. Ferdinand, can you go back to the front for me of the ID?
Certainly. Are you seeing that?
I'm seeing the back. Just pull up the front.
Okay.
Okay, so you see on the front, there is a date there. This ID is approved by the United Nations UNGC on 10/3/13. This ID was actually physically approved by the UN. And you see the logo on the middle of the ID. We are authorized to use the UN logos on our certificates. But apart from that, to put it on an actual ID, there's a different approval for that. Means that we have to submit the format of the ID, the information of the ID to the UN, and they had to approve it, authorize it. So in other words, we are the people that bear this, they're peace ambassadors based on an ID that's been approved by the UN. So this is accepted and acknowledged globally. Just so you understand, it's not just an ID that we made as an NGO. It's actually approved by the UN. And pretty soon, I'm in the process of getting it registered with Homeland Security here in the US. And every country we go to, we will register with the government. Oh yeah, that's the Peace Ambassador's certificate.
Is there an expiry date? I noticed when we were at the back of that one, there was an expiry date on it. Is this something that you have to renew over time?
Yeah, now let me just say, when I issue the IDs, according to the UN guidelines, which I will send out to everybody, the IDs can only be issued up to 2 years at a time. And then it would have to be renewed. Now, we will, there's a cost to renewing it, and when that time comes, we will renew it for the individuals. As you notice, we're not asking people or demanding people to give donations to us, but just for information. Because of the organization, the way our organization is set up, we are in need of funding to do different things. And to keep our registrations with the European Union and the United Nations, it runs somewhere between $60,000 to $75,000 per year, just to keep all our certifications in place. We are also part of ISO 9001, and it takes a lot to keep these certifications. I'm not sure how many of you may be aware of how ISO works, but it's international standards. There's quite a lot of things that needs to be done to maintain these certifications and the UN certifications that we do have in place. So like I said, we're not demanding, at your will, at whatever, if you desire to donate to the organization, you can. But there is no set demand of anything. But we will renew it for you when that time comes.
Dr. KALLOO, I think one of the areas that you could probably clarify in terms of the peace ambassadorship, I did receive a question if that is automatic or if that is something that is you are required to apply for, approvals and endorsements, those kind of things. If you could just clarify that.
Endorsements as far as what?
Your local endorsement, the application. Is the peace ambassadorship something that is automatic when this session is finished, or do you have to apply for it? And in applying, do you need a local endorsement from your local people or something of the sort?
Right. You will need, I believe I have sent out the forms to heads of every country and even to the chief. Did I send that out to you? Chief
You sent me the
all right. That it's very important that these applications be filled out properly, because we when we issue these IDs, like I said, it was approved by the UN. We are held accountable for maintaining records and doing things in a very professional manner. So we have to make sure people fill out these applications. If it needs the endorsement, we need you to get it endorsed. Whatever the requirements are there, we need to get it. One thing I want to stress also is that we strongly believe in people, and I'm going to stop the recording here for a second, okay?